The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning and welcome to the Contours Travel webinar. Today we'll be talking about Quito and also a little bit of a feature on the Casa Gangotena Hotel. As mentioned, my name's Rodney. If I can just get someone to type, if you can hear me, just a yes or something along those lines. No, is anyone out there? Okay, that's perfect. Okay, so what we're going to be talking about today is Quito. Quito is the capital of Ecuador. Okay, to give you a little bit of an idea on sort of how it all fits, Quito is roughly the size of Victoria, actually just a little bit bigger, and quite a diverse country where it features the Pacific coastline. Okay, you've got the cloud forest regions, you've got the high Andes through the centre of the country, dropping down to the Amazon basin here. So it's a very diverse country with a population of around about 16 million people. So what we're talking about today is Quito and the surrounds, and over the coming weeks we'll be having further webinars to learn more about Ecuador and the different regions. So quite a beautiful and very diverse country. To travel through the country itself, it's just a beautiful array of patchwork fields, very colourful, very scenic with its different regions. Okay, the capital of Quito sits almost on the equator, so essentially the weather patterns are very similar throughout the year, ranges from sort of a 21 to 23 degrees per day, getting down to 7 to 9 degrees overnight. So a very temperate climate, very pleasant. Sun comes up at 6 o'clock and sets at 6 o'clock every day. So no daylight savings required in Ecuador. Okay, it sort of rains sporadically spread throughout the year, but the one important thing to realise is that it is at an altitude, as it lies in the Andes, at an altitude of around 2,800 metres. So initially when people are flying in, be it from Peru, from Colombia or from Chile, as the gateways to get to Ecuador or via the United States, that you do sort of spend a little bit of your first days acclimatising to the altitude. Okay, but generally speaking, the effects will be minimal for people travelling to Quito as their first destination in altitude. Okay, the city itself, historical city, and it's one of the first city declared to be a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Okay, so 86 churches, a lot of a mix from being a former Inca capital to being a Spanish colonial city to a modern independent city today. So it's got a varying styles of architecture, and also sits at the base of Pichincha volcano that we can see there in the background of the city. So surrounded by volcanoes, and there's a series of volcanoes which forms what they call Avenue of the Volcanoes down through the centre of Ecuador. The city basically lays in a valley, so the first time I flew into there, I was sort of quite disheartened when the pilot went past the airport, and sort of it's over there, but turned around and looped around in the valley and flew back and landed, fortunately. But now they've moved the airport out of the city, so the airport's about 30 minutes outside of the city. Okay, so the city is divided up into residential areas, but also, as we know it, the new and the old city. You look more looking towards the new city in that photo, and part of the old city, which forms the historical centre of Quito. Okay, the city with its, as I mentioned, 86 churches has a variety of very ornately decorated churches that you can visit in your time. Generally speaking, a typical visit to Quito would be anywhere between 3 days to 4 days, and then you can add on additional days to visit to the cloud forest, to the Amazon, to Otavalo, to the Galapagos Islands, or take the train Crucero program that operates between Quito and Ecuador. So there's a lot to do in Quito. Everything's sort of spread around there, so it can be a base to explore the rest of the country. So as I mentioned, divided into the old town with the historical type buildings, and then into the new city where a lot of the nightlife is based, with a variety of bars and restaurants spread throughout the city, with a lot of the university students and people and locals gathering to take in the nightlife of the city. Okay, from a cultural point of view, there's plenty to do. It's not just churches. There's a variety of wonderful museums, one of them being the Chapel of Man Museum, which is put together and features the works of Oswaldo Guayasamín, okay, who was a local artist. Unfortunately, never got to see the museum open with it, which is basically built in the form of an Inca temple there. Okay, so that's one of many different things to do in and around Quito. And as I mentioned, it forms the point from where you can travel to Otavalo, to the markets, which we'll show in a moment, down into the Amazon Valley, to the Galapagos Islands, to the Papayacta Hot Springs, and also down by rail, down on the Devil's Nose train ride, down to Guayaquil and in the South Cuenca. So it's certainly a wonderful place from which to explore a beautiful country in Ecuador. Okay, travelling to the north of the country, one of the many places that you can visit is around the Otavalo Market. Otavalo is known for its traditionally dressed women with their white and embroidered blouses, their shawls, their red bracelets, and also the gold jewellery that they wear around the neck. The men equally in their calf-length trousers, their blue ponchos. You can see them throughout Ecuador and always sort of know that they're from the Otavalo region. So the market, well worth a visit, but also in the area surrounding there with the lakes, the volcanoes, and the artisan villages where they produce all the goods sold in the market. Certainly well worth a trip up to Otavalo. Saturday is market day, but throughout the year, the markets operate. So certainly worth a visit. Another destination that draws tourists is to the Papayacta Hot Springs. So it's located about an hour and a half to the east of Quito, where you can easily go down there for a day trip, or there is accommodation on site where you can also spend some time. It is on the way heading down from the Andes into the Amazon direction. As I mentioned before, Ecuador, basically the name comes in due that the equator runs directly through the country. Just slightly, about 24 kilometres north of Quito is the equator, so it's easy to take a little trip, which takes about 45 minutes to get out to the monument that marks the centre of the world, or where the equator is. Okay, so there's lots of little tricks that they do out there with the monument, with the egg, with the water going in different directions down a sink, if that makes any sense. So you can go out and get your photos taken with a leg in either hemisphere as such. Okay. Also, what we'll be talking about today is one of the wonderful hotels that is located in the historical centre of Quito. This is known as the Casa Gangotena. This beautiful hotel features 31 different types of rooms, varying in across a range of different styles. Because of its heritage, they haven't changed or adapted the size of the original rooms, which was formerly a historical mansion in the centre of Quito. It's ideally located on Plaza San Francisco, which is the heart of Quito's historic Old Town, okay, and a beautiful place from which to explore the Old Town of Quito. Okay, you can see there it's very well furnished and a beautiful place to relax in comfort. In this particular room here, this is where they have their afternoon high tea in true British style, with the different teas and pastries and things, which is a feature of the hotel in itself. Beautifully decorated rooms, some with plaza view or looking onto the interior plaza of the hotel. Okay, the food and restaurant within the hotel are very renowned around Quito and Ecuador. The typical Ecuadorian dishes, which use a lot of the local ingredients, and also some of the local drinks that you can experience at the hotel itself. So certainly the hotel, a fantastic place to stay, and can work as a wonderful base from which to explore Quito. I have been and inspected the hotel, and from a luxury point of view, It's right up there as one of the best hotels that I've ever seen anywhere in the world, and will sort of make for a very comfortable stay for people wishing to visit to Ecuador. Okay, so if you have people wishing to visit to Ecuador and Quito, we can certainly put together a program for that, combining the Galapagos Islands, the train crucero, and any other parts of Latin America. Certainly feel free to contact us, contours@contourstravel.com, or have a look at our website, contourstravel.com, for more information about Ecuador and wonderful destinations throughout Latin America. Okay, and as you may or may not know, Contours has been one of the first Latin America travel wholesaler operating for over 40 years. Okay. Now, at the end of every webinar, we have a little question that can put you in the draw to go on a Contours Travel hosted famil. As I mentioned earlier in the webinar, the question is, what time is sunrise and sunset in Quito daily? If you could write us an email with the answer to contours@contourstravel.com.au with your answer, and you could go into the draw for a place on a webinar. That comes to the end of today's webinar. If you have any questions, please feel free to type away. If not, have a wonderful day, and please feel free to get in contact if we can be of any assistance.